French President Emmanuel Macron says that he won't reduce the number of troops deployed in Africa's Sahel region, despite pressure from home and abroad to do so. Macron made the remarks after talks in February with leaders of the 5 Sahel countries.
Tighten our grip on the 3 borders, especially with the Chadian battalion, but starting from the coming days and weeks to lead concrete operations in this zone to regain control.
Hello, I'm Mubarak Kenya, and welcome to this week's edition of Africa Today, which is focusing on renewed efforts by France to tighten its grip on Africa's Sahel region. We are asking, is France in the Sahel to combat terrorism or to exploit the region's natural resources, especially uranium, which it desperately needs to produce electricity? In the second part of our program, we shall go deep into Africa's Great Rift Valley and see how Kenya has become Africa's #1 geothermal energy producer and among the top 10 in the world.
Now we're in Olkaria, and this is where we have the geothermal power plants, the biggest plant in Africa.
So stay tuned as our experts give us an in-depth analysis, and don't forget to visit our social media pages and post your comments on today's program.
French troops and Sahel uranium. The Sahel is a vast African area with a population of almost 100 million people across 5 countries: Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger, which form the G5 Sahel. Takfiri terrorism, trafficking of arms, drugs, and people, and other transitional forms of organized crime are threatening security in this region. French President Emmanuel Macron has said he won't change the number of troops deployed in the region. Currently, France has deployed at least 5,100 troops in the Sahel region. Macron made the declaration after February talks with the leaders of the G5 Sahel grouping. He described any rushed exit as a mistake.
I think that rushing into a French pullout, at least a willingness to massively remove men, which is one of the options I looked at, would be a mistake. And that's the fruit of the discussions I've had with each leader.
On paper, the French military is currently in the Sahel to fight terrorism. But others say the real reason France continues to risk the lives of its troops in this region it once colonized is to protect French economic and geostrategic interests, especially exploitation of the gold and uranium mines.
Now, for more on this, we have contacted Daniel Lazar, a New York-based journalist and author. Thanks a lot for your time, Mr. Lazar. Now, what do you think is the source of the conflict in the Sahel, and how did we get this far?
The Sahel has always been an area of political turbulence and instability, at least going back to the 1960s. But certainly, events since the NATO incursion in Libya have made things far worse. The toppling of the Gaddafi government let loose a flood of arms, which extended to the entire region and had tremendous destabilizing effects. It led to a huge number of armed fighters, many of them of Islamist bent, and therefore it contributed to a growing civil war across the region, and that provided an excuse for Western intervention by both France and the U.S., and that has led to more turmoil, more anarchy, more chaos. Military intervention almost invariably makes things worse, and certainly the Sahel is a textbook example of why that is the case.
Now, during the G5 Sahel summit in N'Djamena, the host, Chadian President Idriss Déby, appealed for assistance from global partners.
More than 150 Malayan soldiers have lost their lives, along with hundreds of civilians in recent months. 4,500 French soldiers are in the Sahel as part of Operation Barkhane to fight terrorist forces. Security experts such as Ibrahim Maiga explain the resentment is not only directed at France, but also the Malayan government.
While leaders in the Sahel region seem to officially welcome the presence of French troops, the masses have on several occasions come out to reject the presence of foreign troops. A civil rights activist in Mali questions the presence of French troops in his country. Let's take a listen.
What is this French presence for? It's useless. The French military, which we see as an occupying force, should go home.
President Macron says he will keep his country's troops in the Sahel region to continue fighting terrorism, despite the fact that masses in the region and even French citizens are opposed to the presence of the troops.
Well, I think that Macron wants to keep a finger in the pie, just as other imperialist countries do as well, most especially the United States. But when the situation is fast deteriorating, as it is in the Sahel, it puts a country like France in a dilemma. It can't stay because its presence is making things worse by the month, but then it can't leave either because it's afraid of the consequences of the total chaos that might ensue, which would then spill over into Europe in the form of refugees primarily, and perhaps terrorism as well.
France receives at least 75% of its energy from nuclear power, more than any other country in the world. According to some estimates, over 50% of the uranium ore extracted from Niger is used for fueling French nuclear power plants. The Sahel region is rich in resources, especially gold and uranium. Could this possibly be the main reason for continued presence of French troops in this region?
It undoubtedly is a very important factor in France's ongoing military intervention in the Sahel. France has material interest in the region. It wants to make sure that its resource needs are satisfied, and therefore it will do what it can to ensure that friendly governments are in place in the national capitals. But then again, the problem is always the same. France's presence leads to more chaos, more anarchy, more instability, and therefore France has got to keep committing more troops in order to maintain even a semblance of stability. It never works. The situation is unstable. It's getting worse, and the future looks extremely grim in terms of the former colonial countries.
Mr. Lazardia says that the future looks grim for the Sahel region. Indeed, the future is gloomy for Niger, a former French colony and also one of the poorest countries in the world. Now, despite vast reserves of uranium, which mostly goes to France, the vast majority of the population of 22 million is poor.
While Niger's uranium lights the Eiffel Tower and many homes in France, the people of Niger, the owners of this wealth, have no electricity and live in squalid conditions. A resident who lives near a French-owned uranium mine in Niger's Agadez region laments on her situation. Selling natural resources is the right of any country. However, Sahel countries languish in poverty despite having strategic resources such as uranium and gold. Are they getting a raw deal from Western countries, especially France?
Undoubtedly they are. The Western countries regard them as playgrounds, as military training fields. They feel they can do whatever they want there, and they with little concern as to the consequences. So therefore, more and more chaos erupts, and the imperial countries, the French, the U.S., etc., shrug their shoulders and carry on as usual, with little concern about the human cost. And the human cost is immense. I mean, the people in these regions lack the ability to create stable lives for themselves because of the anarchy that is continually stirred up by foreign intervention. I'm not trying to say that things would be fine if France and the U.S. just kept their hands off, because that's obviously unrealistic. But certainly, French and U.S. Intervention are making things much worse.
Is the French and U.S. intervention the main source of the conflict in the region?
Well, I think it's certainly an important source, but there are many sources of conflict in the region, and that's just one of them. The region is caught in the crossfire between competing imperial interests, and therefore it is suffering terribly. But certainly, the foreign looting of domestic resources is one very important factor in pushing those countries over the edge of a cliff.
Speaking last October, the UN Secretary General said there is need for a renewed push for peace and reconciliation in the Sahel.
Violence is rising, and women and girls are especially vulnerable. Internal displacement has increased 20-fold in less than 2 years. The number of families facing hunger has tripled, climate change is threatening people's livelihoods, and COVID-19 is making all of it worse. We need to reverse this downward spiral with a renewed push for peace and reconciliation.
Now, as we conclude our interview, Mr. Lazar, can you tell us what needs to be done to restore peace in the Sahel?
Well, the most important thing that needs to be done is that France and the U.S. and other countries should withdraw their forces and leave it to the people themselves to work out their own problems. As I said, we must be realistic and realize that those problems won't be solved in a day, but certainly removing Western intervention would certainly be an important first step.
Well, Mr. Lazar, there says that withdrawal of U.S. troops and French forces should be the initial step towards ending the conflict in the Sahel. Now, what do you think there? You let us know through our social media handle.
Kenya's geothermal energy milestone.
Geothermal energy is heat within the earth. It's a renewable energy source because heat is continuously produced inside the earth. Let's have a look.
Geothermal power plants work like this. Pockets of water deep beneath the earth are superheated by magma or melted rock. The water is piped to the surface where boiling hot steam powers generators. There's little pollution and the supply of electricity can last for generations. That's because when the water is cooled, it's returned to the underground reservoir so the process can be repeated over and over again.
Kenya's Rift Valley region contains substantial geothermal energy, enough to power the country and beyond. The country has tapped this renewable energy and is now Africa's largest producer of geothermal energy and among the top 10 in the world. The current installed geothermal capacity in Kenya is 823 megawatts. With the untapped potential of 10,000 megawatts of geothermal energy, Kenya is on track to join the club of 4 countries with an installed 1,000 megawatts capacity or greater.
For more on Kenya's progress in utilizing geothermal power to power its economy, we have contacted Simon Kiragu, an energy practitioner and youth advocate. Now, thanks for your time, Mr. Kiragu. How has Kenya been able to develop into a leading geothermal energy producer in the world?
First of all, a major plus for us is the spectacular geological feature that we have, which is the Rift Valley. And the East Africa Rift Valley system has a potential of about 15,000 megawatts, of which Kenya boasts of an estimated 10,000 megawatts of that. So Kenya aims to develop and market and utilize about 1,000, more than the 1,000 megawatts from the geothermal resources. And in my opinion, why Kenya is leading is one, there's an aspect of risk mitigation. Through the Geothermal Development Corporation, the government has developed steam fields and sells geothermal steam for electricity generation to both Kenyan and also private investors. So this one takes away the risk that many investors are not willing to take, and also allowing investors to come in at a later, more proven stage of geothermal development.
Now, according to the International Energy Agency, in Kenya, access to electricity rose from 20% in 2013 to almost 85% in 2019. The use of geothermal energy is changing lives of people in Kenya, as these rural-based hairdresser explains here. Let's take a listen. Mr. Muigai Kiragu, can you elaborate on how the use of geothermal energy has impacted on the economy and the daily lives of people, especially in terms of eradicating poverty?
By last year, geothermal accounted for more than 50% of the electricity generated in Kenya, and this has lowered the cost of power between 20 and 35% for both domestic and industrial consumers, respectively. So in this aspect, it has translated to the cost of doing business. Cost of power reduction will result to fairer cost of products, which will be felt by consumers. So also in terms of geothermal energy, over the recent years, there has been impacts like, for example, it has boosted tourism through the medicinal spas that we have in Naivasha. And also we have other economic models that are being currently piloted, which are going to have a ripple effect with the economy. Like, for example, using the geothermal energy for milk pasteurization, aquaculture, greenhouse heating. We have also heating of fish ponds.
Clearly, geothermal energy is having positive impact on the lives of the people in Kenya. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has been at the forefront of his country's quest for clean and renewable energy. At a groundbreaking ceremony for the Olkaria 5 geothermal power development project built by 2 Japanese firms and 1 Kenyan, Kenyatta voiced support for public-private sector partnership in such projects.
We should allow the private sector to also engage so that through that public-private partnership, we are able to faster achieve our objectives of being energy self-sufficient, reliable power, cheap power, clean power, in a much faster time than the period that we've set ourselves for 2030. So mine is to really thank everybody who has been involved, the government of Japan, the government of China.
As we know, geothermal exploration is risky and capital intensive. How has Kenya been able to overcome this challenge?
Indeed, geothermal exploration is capital intensive. Like, for example, drilling a 50 megawatts well cost about approximately 30 million USD at the testing phase, and also it takes about 3 years. So along the way, Kenya has received support from bilateral development, whereas like organizations like the United Nations are being instrumental in facilitating training of our engineers through the United Nations Geothermal Training Program. So, for example, last year but one, the Geothermal Development Corporation received about 2 billion from the Exchequer, which is in Kenya shillings, and towards capital expenditure, and about 4 billion for steam sales and exchequer recurrent budget. So GDC has also further embarked with support from financing partners like African Union Commission through the Geothermal Risk Mitigation Facility.
The United Nations University has a postgraduate training program aiming at assisting developing countries in capacity building within geothermal exploration and development. The director of the United Nations University Geothermal Training Program speaks here on the importance of training in this sector.
If you want to have a serious development, you cannot only do it through consultants. You have to know yourself what you're doing. That's a key thing to a real success in geothermal development.
Do Kenyans have any technical expertise to produce geothermal energy or have to rely on foreign companies? And what steps have been taken to build indigenous capacity?
Of course, Kenya does have technical expertise, and sometimes they also have partnerships with some foreign countries to build the skills. And currently, Kenya has a hub is a hub for skills, capacity, and technology transfer, and it boasts of a Geothermal Center of Excellence, which is the Geothermal Development Corporation's in-house training facility, which was founded as a response to an existing regional skills gap in the geothermal energy subsector. So the center offers comprehensive peer-reviewed programs in all aspects of geothermal energy development. And also the Center of Excellence aims to upgrade the competence level of geothermists in the region through formal training of students, regional conferences where geothermists can share experiences, publications of biannual scientific journals that will document scientific developments in the geothermal subsector within the region.
Now, Mr. Muigai, you have talked there about Geothermal Energy Center of Excellence in Kenya. Now, are other regional countries with geothermal energy potential benefiting from Kenya's experience?
We have countries where the geothermal programs, where we have partnered with, like, for example, Djibouti, to have geothermal engineers trained at the Center of Excellence, and investing in these in expert with considerable experience in geothermal exploration and also drilling, and they will be able to build the capacities of teams within working with the projects. Like, for example, if I can add a little bit, we have also been able to benchmark with other countries for development of geothermal sites and projects. For example, Kenya has been working with a number of countries that include Kenya, that include Uganda, Tanzania, Djibouti, South Sudan, Zambia, and Comoros. So these paradigm shifts has been able to cement Kenya's position as the ideal skill, capacity, and technology partner to other African countries.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kiragu Muigai, energy practitioner in Kenya, for that insight.
However, Kenya's geothermal energy production comes with its own challenges to the pristine environment and the local Maasai community.
We live a nomadic life system. We move from one place to another looking for pasture. We are fully dependent on livestock. We don't cultivate. Because of the pipeline network crossing from one corner of the locality to the other, that denies the access of animals to certain areas.
While traditional ways of life and the environment cannot remain unaffected by development projects, geothermal power remains greener than most alternatives.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Today. On behalf of the entire Africa Today team, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Take care and goodbye for now.